Joining me on DIRTRACKR Conversations is a late model shoe Devin Moran. And Devin, I have have you on the show because I want to talk to you about a couple of specific things, but I want to start with kind of most recent events in Florida. And you guys had a really nice Florida swing. And I'm curious about your kind of off-season preparation and getting to Florida and things like that, because you guys were one of the few teams that were really consistent through that opening stretch.
Yeah, it was definitely a great speed weeks for us, for the Tide Torque Racing Longhorn. Best speed weeks I've ever had in my career, to be honest. And like you said, it was kind of just really consistent. I wish we could have got a couple more wins, but at least we got one while we were down there and a bunch of top fives. So to be honest, like it was kind of a weird off season. So I did have my surgery in October, and I was in a cast for 11 weeks. I got it off 2 weeks before we left, so it was pretty hard for me to do anything. So I got to give major credit to Wiley and a couple other guys that came up and just helped out at the shop during the winter. There's a ton of work to do and not a long off season anymore. So we built two brand new Longhorns over the winter, and we got our Chevy Clements engines in them, and we were just really good. I felt like we weren't quite as prepared as we needed to be honest. I don't feel like we worked on speed as much as we should have in the winter, but all in all, it played out really good for us to start out the speed weeks. We were consistent. I think they said we had 9 out of 14 top fives or whatever with our win at Volusia. Just actually, at every track we went to, we had a top five. So it was pretty cool that we were good at all the different kind of tracks that we went to. So it was definitely a fun way to start the year, and I just hope we can kind of carry that momentum in throughout the rest of the 2021 season.
We saw that kind of opening week at East Bay was such a wild start, and a lot of guys had issues and things like that. But what's so difficult about East Bay?
To be honest, it's just a weird racetrack. Like the configuration and stuff's not that weird, but just the way the dirt is. You go to places and you think it's slick and you can't really steer that well, and you're like, oh, this is kind of like East Bay. But then you show up at East Bay and like you go out there for the feature the first night and it's slick, and I'm telling you, you literally cannot not see anything or cannot steer at all. Like you go in the turn one and you have no wheel input and you're driving strictly off of the rear tires, and like you kind of think it's bad, and then you get there and it's just way worse than anywhere you can go. So it makes it tough for competitors, especially people that haven't traveled around a lot, because you have to adapt, and it's a completely different style of racing there than it is everywhere else in the country. And when you've never been down there, and even when we go down there every year, on the first night everyone has to get readjusted to it. And for guys like myself and Tyler Erb and Davenport and some of these guys who travel all over the country and have to adapt quicker than most people, I feel like we have a little bit of an advantage for that place. But for someone coming out of Ohio or Pennsylvania or North Carolina, anywhere that just races regional or local, they go down there and they're not used to it. It's just a completely different ball game. It is hard, and it definitely has a bunch of struggles for people. Even myself, when I go down there, I mean, a couple of nights we just weren't any good and ran 12th and 15th or whatever. It's just kind of the way that place is. But it just always throws you for a curveball, and you have to be ready to adapt to anything that's coming at that place for sure.
When you we hear this a lot about Volusia, how like there's not really racetracks around the country that are like Volusia, and is there things you can take away from those early season races between East Bay and Volusia and Alltech, some of the places you guys go, that you can then use the rest of the season, or is it kind of like its own little thing that you can't really learn anything from?
I mean, there's definitely pieces of the puzzle that you can take away from it. But all in all, like, I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of Florida, the time of year, the racetracks, what it is. But like, once you get away from speed weeks, you really have to like just get past it and focus on the future. You can tell if you have a pretty good race car down there or not on the different track conditions, but like it's just different. I don't know what it is, but you can, like I said, you can take bits and pieces to answer your question, but you definitely can't like look at your notebook in Florida because it's just different than other places in the country. So you like to take the confidence and stuff when you leave out there if you run really good and go with that. But other than that, there's not a ton that you can really take from Florida. You just kind of have to go back into last year's notes a little bit and take a little bit of Florida notes that you learned and just kind of combine everything and try to make the best race car you can.
So the main reason I want to have you on the show, I want to learn and I want to know what it's like to actually drive a super late model. And for you, you and you talked about Wiley and your dad, like you guys are such a big kind of late model family, and I'm sure it's like basically all you've known. But I want to ask like a lot of really stupid questions about late models, and I want to start with like, when you strap in, how do you fire a super late model?
So honestly, it's kind of different than what like your standard car is, or like a standard pickup truck, like a standard shift in our car. So obviously we have like our main switch behind the driver's seat, the on and off power switch. You got obviously to make sure that's on. And on our switch panel in front of us, we have whether you can go on crank trigger distributor for the ignition. We have our actual ignition, which powers up the MSD and all of our electrical stuff. And then our three-wheel brake switch. And then you have our start switch. So the only thing you have to turn on to get it to start is you got to turn the main switch on in the back, and then you got to turn the ignition on. And once you do that, you just bump the start switch until it fires. Once it fires, you're good to go. It's kind of a weird transmission. So actually what you do before you gas it or clutch it or anything, you just put it in the low. You have 3 gears. You have low, high, and reverse, but you put it in the low. And once you do, you actually press the clutch and the gas at the same time, which is like the opposite of any kind of street vehicle. And you press them at the same time, the speed a little bit. You just shift it back into high. And then once you're in high, you rock and roll with it. So you go into high when you're just riding around in parade laps. And once you're in high, you start in high, you race in high. The only time you ever kick it back out of high is if there's a red flag or you're going into the pits. So it's pretty easy once you get used to it, but pushing the gas and the clutch at the same time will definitely confuse some people. So it'd be hard for someone to steal race a late model without knowing what's going on with the transmission. They'd have it all jacked up.
Do you know what the reasoning is behind having the high gear and the low gear?
Honestly, not really. That's just kind of what we've always been. Like I know, like you go to like the off-road trucks and stuff like that, they've got paddle shifters and different things like that. But our late model racing, at least for as long as I know, it's just you're kind of in high and you go. We have our quick change rear ends, and that's what we do. Winters does a great job with all that, and we've had awesome luck with all of our Winters rear ends, and they've done a great job of changing gear ratios right there, and we haven't had to do any other form. Our Clements motors have enough power to take off even when we got a real high gear in, and we can rock and roll to a place like Volusia. You can go from say 40 to 100 mile an hour like it's nothing. So I think just the way our cars design, our rear ends are designed, the way our engines are designed, we just don't really have to do that. And once we get up to speed, it's kind of that deal where you just go with it. So I can't pinpoint why it's like that. It's just kind of always been like that, and it's kind of worked out pretty good for us.
When you're sitting in the car and you know you've got a dash in front of you, what's on your dash? Like what gauges you have? What information are you getting?
So we really don't have a lot. The only in cockpit controls we have our three-wheel brake switch, and then we have our brake bias, and those are the only 2 things that we can change in the cockpit. Them are the only 2 things we can change once we get out onto the track. But in our dash, we've got our oil pressure, oil temperature. We actually have water pressure, water temperature, and then fuel pressure. And we have dummy lights and all that for all those. And then we have our tack, but you really don't read the tack while you're racing. When you're warming up and doing some stuff, you can check down at it, but you really don't look at that until after the races. And to be honest, when you're racing, unless it's a bigger track and you're kind of by yourself, it's pretty hard to read gauges. People might talk about how they read them, but when you're rocking and rolling at East Bay or somewhere and you're 3 wide and you're racing, people don't look at their gauges very often. And that's why we have the dummy lights. If you got everything hooked up right and you got your sensors right, a light will come on, and it's say if you're out of water pressure halfway through the race and you look and it's not reading water temperature and your water pressure light's on, you know you got a serious problem. And that's when you usually pull in. It's on that side of things. A lot of times I do look at my gauges like down the end of the straightaway when you got a little bit of time, if you have time, but mainly under caution. You can look at your temperatures and different things like that and read them. And other times when you're testing, or like say hot laps, when I go out for hot laps, I'll check my oil pressure and my fuel pressure. As long as we ain't having any problems and it's looking all right, that's about when you're looking at your gauges. But other than that, it's pretty mild on the gauge side of things.
You mentioned the brake bias and the other brake thing. What is happening when you use those? How often do you use them? Is that something you can do like while you're driving? Do you have to wait for caution? Like, give me an idea about those.
So the three-wheel brake switch, it's just the right front shut off. So obviously we have 4 brakes on the car for all 4 corners. We'll turn the three-wheel brake switch on, which at that point, the right front has no brake. You usually do that on a pretty tacky, heavy track. The cars nowadays usually run three-wheel brake switch almost all the time. I know like Scott and some of them guys don't. They still have cars that they can steer good enough, and the way they drive, they still use 4-wheel brake quite a bit. But it just helps you turn. And yeah, I mean, sometimes, not very often, but sometimes, like I've been to places where I'll flip it on each side of the straightaway. Like you're going down the backstretch into 3 and it's real tacky and rough. You need it on, and going into 1 and 2, it's super slick and you don't need it on. And I've messed with it while I've raced some. Not very often will you do that, but every once in a while when there's a scenario, if your car is really good and you're comfortable with being able to do it, then that happens. On the brake bias side of things, yeah, I mean, I definitely mess with that while I'm racing quite a bit. In the dirt, you want to start mostly rear brake, and then as the night goes on, if the track gets slicker, you're slowly going to front brake. It just tightens the car up, and a lot of that, like I always check in cautions to see where I'm at, but like a lot of it's just feel. If you're just getting freer and freer, you just slowly keep rolling front brake into it, and usually they have anywhere from 18 to 25 turns, and you'll start, like I said, all the way rear, and sometimes you'll get most of the way to the front by the end of the feature, just depending on how good your car is and how much the track's transitioning. So a lot of that just kind of depends on track and your car, and how comfortable you are, really.
Give me an idea about the inputs you have. Like obviously you have steering wheel, you've got brake, you've got gas, and I would imagine that it's, very track specific and things like that about how much of each you use. But if you can maybe give me a general idea about how much of each you're using and how much of each you're trying to use. Is there like an optimal level of steering wheel versus brake versus gas that you're trying to use as you go around?
Yeah, a lot of it, kind of like you said, it just depends on what track we're at, how fast it is, how much traction, how slick it is. You take like Eldora, for example, it's very round, and it'll start out really fast. You're pretty much wide open there the whole time. If you're a little too tight, you might drag the brake a little bit just on corner entry to help you. And to be honest, like there's not a ton of wheel input when it's fast. Like start of the night, hot laps qualifying, you like left hand down a little bit, wide open. As long as your car steers and you're good, you just go right around there. But then you go to feature time, and you might not be full throttle at all in the feature. You might be, say, 3/4 by the end of the straightaway. Never try to dump out of the gas, but you roll back out of the gas a little bit. You drag the brake a little longer. Definitely more wheel input, left hand down, and then obviously there's not as much grip, so you're counter steering some. You're quarter throttle, half throttle, quarter throttle, just trying to feed it, trying to feel it through the seat. Still dragging the brake a little bit. Just depending on how good your car's hooking up. A lot of it just kind of depends on that, and then that's Eldora. But then you go to a place like East Bay where you literally full wheel input left, back to full input right, counter steering, completely dumping out of the gas to completely back wide open to dumping out of the gas. Like East Bay is one extreme to another compared to Eldora, and a lot of it, like I said, just depends on where you're going and what the track conditions like. Kind of back to like how we talked about how you have to adapt so much to different racetracks, and that's why I love dirt racing. You have to go from one extreme to the other. In asphalt racing, I don't think the track ever changes 5 seconds, and we see that quite often. So it just makes for exciting, good racing, and I feel like it makes a driver definitely have to step up his game.
When you're like on a tight bull ring type place and you're rolling the bottom, are there instances where like you're just completely out of the gas? Like, no feed on anything, like you're just letting it roll the center?
Oh yeah, and that actually happens at like big tracks too, quite a bit. You usually try to keep one or the other. You want to keep your torque arm loaded up. When you stay on the gas a little bit, it definitely keeps the torque arm loaded up, keeps you a little more drive. But like for some instances, like you go to a place and like Fairbury, for example, you get down into the bottom of 3. When it gets to that certain track condition, you drive straight in there. You don't dump out of the gas, but you slowly let out, and then you finally get all the way out, and you don't even have to touch the brakes if your car's good enough to rotate, and then you're right back on it. Usually, like I'm brake in, gas off. Once I get to where I want, and slowly back out on both, and then back in the gas. Once again, a lot of it's just so much on track condition and where you're going. But there's definitely instances where you're coasting into a place, and just depends where you're going and what's happening.
When you're on track, say during a long feature, a 50 lap or 100 lap, or, in terms of like watching the track conditions, are you actually like watching it with your eyes, or is it a matter of like you're trying to feel what the car is doing and then making adjustments from there, like as the track changes?
Definitely a mixture of both. Obviously you can see a lot better than you can feel on most. Well, I wouldn't say a lot better, because a lot of the times you can feel pretty good of what's going on. But you can see the dirt. As long as you're looking at the dirt, you kind of know what's happening, what's going on. Your eyes don't deceive you very often on the dirt side of things. And then on the field, like you see that brown dirt and you go in there and it sticks, and you see it the next time and it just doesn't stick quite as well. That's when you know you have to take the feel into consideration as well. Like if you can go in there and you stick, you try to go in harder the next lap and you stick even better, you can feel that. And that's not as much see. So I would honestly say it's 50-50 on what you see and what you feel. If your car feels too tight and you can't run up against that wall, you see the brown there, but you can't do it. It's just how it is. You can go try to do it and you wreck and tear up and it doesn't matter anyways. So there is a lot of feel that you still have to take into consideration. So it's definitely a 50-50 on seat of feel. I feel like when you're out there kind of racing and seeing what's happening. Another thing, like you got to be able to see the cars out in front of you. If you see three guys running the top and one guy running the bottom, the guy on the bottom passes them. You see that you got to get to the bottom and get by him. But like at Volusia one night, I passed Madden around the bottom, and then the next lap there's a lap car on the bottom, so I had to run the top, and I instantly felt that the top was faster. And you just that feel you kind of just got to go with instinct and do what it's telling you, you know.
When you have a feeling like that, where you could feel that the top was faster, what about it was like, why did you know it was faster? Could you just feel more grip? Were you able to run more RPM? Like, what is that? Like, what is the car telling you there?
So you can't really tell much on RPM. You can listen to it, but like I said, you can't really read it while you're racing. But a lot of it is a grip feel. And a lot of it you can judge off of other cars once more. You can judge off of lap cars, which is back to the scene thing. But a lot of it, you just feel the grip. And when you feel that grip and you can just make so much speed, it just you have to be patient sometimes because the field doesn't always give you the right answer. You definitely, once again, it's just back to the 50-50 deal. You have to be able to see what's going on and you have to be able to feel it at the same time. So as long as you can do both and kind of keep it even and concentrate on that, it usually puts you in pretty good shape.
Do you have a preference one way or the other about, running the top or running the bottom? Like if you have a choice, would you rather be on the top? Would you rather be on the bottom? I feel like we have certain guys that we see all the time up top, or certain guys we see all the time up bottom. Where do you sit on that?
I'd rather be wherever is going to make me win the race. I honestly don't care. Like I like running the bottom. I think it's fun. It kind of makes you more patient, more methodical. But at the same time, I like going up and ripping the lip and like putting on a show for fans. And then in different instances, when my car's really good and I can run right through the middle and everyone's going either way and I go right by them all, that's just as fun too. So to be honest, wherever I got to go to win, that's what I'm going to do. And I really don't care where it's at.
What can you learn during hot laps? Like, is there anything you can learn? Is it just to, make sure the car feels like it's supposed to feel? Like, are you going back and making setup changes after a couple hot laps?
Yeah, sometimes you have to be careful about hot laps. I always used to say that I liked hot laps, but I kind of getting more like I wish we always did hot lap qualifying. It kind of like you just get rolling with it and you go. Some people aren't a fan of it. I never used to be. I'm kind of getting more and more that way. It is what it is. We have all week to prepare and we want to go race, so let's make it happen. But yeah, like I can go out hot lap and then I come back in and I'm like, hey, I know we got to do this. I know we got to do that. And then sometimes it's real greasy and you can't tell anything. And then sometimes the track changes so much from hot laps to qualifying that it puts you in a bad spot. So you do have to be careful about hot laps, but it's still not a bad thing. I don't mind just hot lapping and then qualifying, but I don't know. Everyone has their own opinion, and I don't know what the right answer is, but it's not a bad thing, all in all.
When you're driving the car, I would imagine the cars are set up to want to, on some level, to want to be sideways through the corner. And like, when you're running down the straightaway, like, can you just hold the steering wheel straight, or like, do you have to steer one way or the other to keep the car straight down the straightaway?
Depends how good we are that night. Like sometimes you're counter steering the whole way around and you're just horrible. To be honest, you really, like you say, you want to be kind of sideways, but really sideways usually isn't as fast because you're scrubbing speed and you're just not going forward. The straighter you are, the faster you are. And that's usually why you see Scott Bloomquist, like not as much as of late, but like he's won a ton of races, and it's because he's not wasting energy going sideways. He's going straight forward, and that's when he's passing the cars. So to be honest, yeah, we definitely are straight going down the straightaways. Sometimes we're counter steered and sometimes we're turned to the left if we're too tight. So a lot of it, once again, just depends on what's going on with the race car, type of racetrack. Obviously, long straightaways, you're kind of straight way more. You go to a place like Tyler County and you're counter steered the whole time, just the way the track is. So a lot of it depends on the racetrack. A lot of it depends on the race car. A lot of it depends on driver preference. Like you get someone like Tyler Irvin, and he's more sideways than someone like what Scott Bloomquist would be. So just a lot of different variables, but there's not always a wrong way. It's just whoever's winning is winning.
When you come back to the pits after a heat race or after qualifying or whatever, when you guys are talking about setup and what to change, are you like a really technical hands-on person where you're like, I want to change this, I want to do that? Or are you just coming back saying, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm seeing, and then letting them make those decisions?
Well, usually I'm the one making the decisions. So I'm pretty hands-on. I've got a couple guys that really go with me a lot. Keith Burner with AccuForce. He does all my Fox shocks, and I have a really great relationship with him. Obviously Wiley, my brother, he's pretty hands-on. He does all my tires and some of that stuff. But to be honest, I talk over, but I do a lot of the changes myself. Sometimes you just get to the point where you're like, hey, you handle it. I'll tell you what I feel, and we'll move on. But 99% of the times I'm usually hands-on and know what's going on. And to be honest, I feel like that's just going to make me better in the future.
In talking about running the top, you see all the time, guys will run the top and they knock that rear quarter out, they mess the deck up, the spoiler. When that happens, like, can you actually feel that in the car when you've got that, that right rear quarter laid up against the fence?
Oh, 110%. Like, obviously, if you ask Bobby, he might not as much because he's always winning races with that off. But like that one night at Volusia, actually at East Bay was even worse. I knocked half my spoiler off, and I knew I was no good. I just went ahead and pulled off. It was no reason to tear anything else up. But it's just like you get a big piece of cardboard and put out in the wind and hold it, and then you take half of it away and hold it. It's not going to blow you away like that first big piece is. And that's just like our racing is. You take half that spoiler off and it's just not going to hold the race car like it would if that whole spoiler was there. So you definitely do feel it. Even with the right side, we get side force going into the corners, even driving down the straightaways, we get side force. So you knock your whole quarter panel in and stuff like that, it's definitely going to affect your car. So we do have to try to keep that from happening as much as possible. Obviously, the smaller the track, the less it's going to affect. But you're still definitely trying to take care of your body and keep your race car in good shape. And usually in them long races, it definitely pays off.
Have you had an instance where you like hit the wall or did damage and your car was actually better?
Not that I know of. Usually every time I do it, I'm cussing myself and I know I've screwed up. So to be honest, like I really can't think of one time that's actually helped me. Someone else might have a story where it has, because I'm sure it has. Crazy things happen, but for me, no, I've never had like that one instance where I did something and it made my race car faster that night.
Tell me about slide jobs. I feel like, they're like kind of the name of the game in a lot of dirt racing. And like, sometimes they seem to go really well and sometimes they seem to not go so well. Like, when you're the one on the end of, someone's throwing that slider at you, like, are you preparing in advance? Like, do you know that move is coming? And then, are you trying to set yourself back up for the crossover? Like, what's your thought process there?
It's a thought process that has to happen as quick as you can even imagine. Like I like racing. I like sliders. Like that's my favorite kind of racing, to be awesome. To be honest, like when you're crossing over and doing stuff like that. In my opinion, as long as you're clear and you give the guy a chance to cross over, then it's game on. If you go in there and you take his left front out, then it kind of gets a little controversial. But if a guy can't hit the brakes and cross over, or if he's not brave enough to drive around the outside of you when you act like you're going to do it, then I guess you shouldn't be in a race car. And I know some people have different opinions about that. I know some of the older guys think it's disrespectful to slide in front of someone. But like I said, I mean, if you're going to be in a race car, you're not going out there to race just to hang out and not try to pass someone and beat them. So like I said, there is kind of definitely a respectful way to do it. If you're going to slide them, definitely get in front of them and make sure it's kind of done the right way. I don't want to ever take anyone's left front out. And don't get me wrong, in racing, stuff happens. I've made mistakes. Other people's made mistakes. You just have to move on from it. You can't let it bother you your whole life. But yeah, you have to be prepared. Sometimes you don't always see it coming, and that's when you better be really prepared and be on your toes. And sometimes you do see it coming, and you have literally less than a split second to pick whether you're going to drive around the outside of them or cross them over or run into the back of them, which obviously isn't going to help you any because you ain't going to pass them back if that's the case. So you just got to be on your toes and be ready. And whatever they do, you have to adapt and try to get back by him.
When you're like in a battle with a guy, you're side by side, you're swapping spots, whatever, how much are you like making moves and kind of making decisions based on like what you see? Like, can you see that other guy? Are you going off, like, can you hear his engine? Are you like going off your stick signal guy? Like, how much of that is, like how much of that information are you kind of getting?
A lot of that of what you said, and a lot of who you're racing with. You're racing against a guy like Scott Bloomquist. He's not going to slide you back, so you might protect that middle line once you get by him. Or you're racing with a guy like Bobby, who's definitely going to try to slide you back. So you're going to kind of run the slider line with him to keep him from doing it. So it just depends who you're racing with. Once again, kind of track conditions. If that slider line's available, you kind of got to make sure they can't take it. If it's not available, then you kind of go back to what you think you're going to do. So who you're racing with, track conditions, the kind of racetrack you're on. You go to Eldora, you better be ready for a slider coming back, and you better be ready to cross over, because that's how it happens there. You go to a couple other places where sliders don't really work, then you don't have to worry about it. And yeah, I definitely use Wiley as my signal guy. Some guys don't like that, but I mean, when you have a guy, why would you not take advantage of it? So it's hard sometimes when you're racing with other people to get an eye on him, but most of the time we try as hard as we can to keep an eye on each other and go from there.
How much information can you like get from him? Like, your signal guy, like, is he telling you lines to run? Is he just telling you kind of gaps back to people? Like, how much of that is going back and forth?
A lot of it under green is just gaps to people. If I'm pretty comfortable and he's giving me lines to run, I can definitely see. Under cautions, more lines to run and kind of what's going on, kind of talk a little bit more that way about the car, how we're feeling and stuff like that. But under green, a lot of it's just gaps to people is the main thing. And if I see him getting sticks up, that means get up. If I see him going down, then that means go down. But other than that, it's pretty much just gaps under green.
When you first start driving a late model, there's obviously like a lot of body around you. You got a big nose, you got a big tail. How long does it kind of take you to get used to, like, how far you need to be from somebody when you're throwing a slider or making a pass versus like, when you're in behind somebody and not running them over with the nose? Like, does it take a long time to kind of understand like the size of a late model?
Yeah, I mean, at first it definitely did take me a little while. Not really even racing with the other guys, but just by myself. Like you're in a passenger car and you look over and the side of the body's right there. But like when you're in a late model, it's way over there. And to be honest, like at first I wasn't very good at judging like up to the wall, and I'd literally scraped the front stretch wall like the first 2 or 3 races I was in, just because like I just wasn't prepared and wasn't used to it. But after that I kind of got used to it, and really it's normal for me now. Obviously I've raced, this is my 12th season I think racing, so it's kind of just a natural for me at this point. But it definitely does take a little bit of getting used to. And like I said, we're all human, we still make mistakes. So sometimes we have that deal where, oh man, you thought you were clear and you weren't. Sometimes you do it on purpose for simple reasons, but sometimes you just don't know. And mistakes do happen. Myself makes it and everyone else makes mistakes, so you got to live with it and go on.
Give me an idea of your preparation. Are you a workout guy? Are you a sports psychologist guy? Are you watching old races on things like Dirt Vision, some of the streaming services? Like, what do you do to prepare for, a race and a season?
So I definitely do a lot of videos. I like to watch videos of wherever I'm going next. I try to do the workout thing. I usually run, but I really haven't done much of that as of this season, for the simple fact that when I had my cast on, I really wasn't allowed to do any of it. And then we were so far behind once I got it off. I was just working 24/7, but I definitely got to get back in that workout rhythm. But other than that, not really a ton. Just we're so busy in the shop. It's just Wiley and myself in there. So a lot of our preparation is just in the shop, working, getting the cars ready, trying to make our race cars faster. Once again, I do try to watch a lot of videos, and I do try to get a run in every day. But most of our preparation, to be honest, is just working in the shop, trying to get our stuff faster.
You've talked a lot about, guys like Bobby Pierce, Bloomquist. Do you keep like kind of like mental notes on just guys' tendencies? Like when you get in a situation with them, like, are you expecting certain moves from certain guys, or do you have to race certain guys different than others?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you get a guy like Jimmy Owens compared to a guy like Tyler Erb, they're going to race you different. And I can promise you it's just how it is. You're going to race Tyler pretty hard for a couple laps. Sometimes you let him use his stuff up and then you get by him and go on. And a guy like Jimmy's pretty smart about what's going on with his race car. He's really race savvy. he kind of knows what he can and can't do. So you definitely look at tendencies from different guys. You kind of figure out different ways to pass different people. Like when you get racing with Tyler, you want to hurry up and get by him. That way you don't have to deal with it anymore. Because if not, he's going to slide you. You're going to waste half the race racing with one guy. With a guy like Jimmy, it's not as big of a deal. Don't get me wrong, Jimmy's still going to race you just as hard, but it's just a little bit different style racing with Jimmy. Same with Scott, same with Bobby. There's just, everyone has their own tendencies. So I try to focus and see who I'm racing with and what's going on. And if I can kind of execute what I want to and make it happen, it just makes our day a lot easier.
Give me an idea about like the tire situation. Like, you know, the tire rules seem to kind of be a little bit different everywhere you go. And, you know, I know that was one of the things when I worked for the Outlaws is, you know, making sure the website was always updated with all the different tire options. And I'm not quite sure about the Lucas package, but like, you know, do you guys have to deal with that a lot? And is that something that's difficult to do to try to decide on a nightly basis which tires you're going to run?
I will say the Lucas deal actually has a pretty cool tire system. So usually we start the night on 4 softs, say 1300s or whatever they are. And for the feature, you're only allowed one other option for the right rear. In every other corner, you're not allowed to change other than the left rear possibly. And it's still the same compound. So really throughout the night, you have 4 tires, you have 1 right rear option, you have 1 left rear of the same compound you still put back on. So it's really not that bad. Every once in a while, we're getting a little bit of a tire game with people, but for the most part, Lucas does a really good job on trying to save money for people, for tire bills and stuff like that. So I will give them guys props. They do awesome on that side of things.
Can you use tires depending on the corner, multiple races? Is it, you know, one night on a tire and that's it?
No, for a lot of the Lucas races, you do have to bolt on new stuff, just the way it is. But you go to a place like we went to Wheatland, Missouri last year at Lucas Oil Speedway, and the track was super heavy and it didn't really hurt tires, so we could use them tires a couple nights. And then you go to a place like Atomic here in March 19th when we're racing there with Lucas. I'm sure it'll probably wear on our tires pretty hard. It's got pretty good banking. It usually gets pretty black slick, and it's going to wear on them. So that night you might only use one tire, or you might only use those tires from one night. And then you go to a couple regional races for a weekend, and you might use the same 4 tires for both races and not have a problem get to use them again. So a lot's kind of who you're racing with and where you're racing and what's going on. So we just try to be smart and save Ty a little bit of money on the tire side of things, because it's so expensive in our racing. And I do have a ton of great sponsors, but it's crazy what we spend on this side of things, and try to help him out on that as much as we can on the tire side.
When you get into the longer races, the 75 lappers, the 100 lappers, give me an idea about like how much you're saving versus how much you got to go. Like, you know, are you balls out all the time, or do you got to kind of save your stuff for the end of one of those races?
To be honest, it kind of depends where you're racing. You go to a place like Cherokee or Magnolia, Eldora, some of those places, you definitely have to conserve a little bit. It's going to wear and tear on your tires a little bit. Really, other than tires, it's not that big of a deal. Brakes and stuff like that, you don't have too many problems anywhere. But definitely on the tire side of thing, you don't want to use up your sipes and everything else, because if you do for the first 40, just not going to be good. But then on the flip side of that, you go to a place like Portsmouth for the Dirt Track World Championship. Usually that race is locked down for the last 50 laps or so. So you got to go to balls of the wall for the first 50 to try to get to the lead. If you don't get to the lead, then it makes it really hard to get by anyone. So Portsmouth's kind of one of the only places that are like that. But most of the other places, you really do have to conserve at least for the first 40 or 50. If your race car is good, you know you can get up through there. You still got to get track position, get cars when you can, but just try not to slide your tires, try not to use stuff up too early. And that's kind of the way I approach it. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's kind of the approach I've done. And I've won a couple 100 lappers, so it's working out so far, I guess.
When you have a night where the track takes rubber, how quickly in the car do you realize that? Like, do you start seeing things, feeling things in the car before that happens? Like, you know, are there times where it happens and it's too late and you're just screwed? You know, how is that process?
A lot of the rubbers usually feel. You'll definitely start feeling it before you see it usually. Then it'll start streaking it up and you can see it. But by that time, everyone's usually in it. It's just kind of a crappy feeling, to be honest. No one likes racing when tracks rubber up. It makes it one late. It makes it hard to pass. But a lot of that's feel. If you can feel it before everyone else can, you're definitely going to get a couple cars there right before they get into it. So that's always a good thing. But for the most part, for the most part, a lot of it's just feel, and once you feel it, you better not miss it.
When we get into those nights and guys start popping tires, what can you do inside the race car to try to keep your tires underneath you?
A lot of it, I would say you just try to keep from slipping the tires. You try to keep from sliding sideways. You don't always have to be full throttle down the straightaways. Like I know when the track rubber's up, a lot of them guys are still mashing it down the straightaway, but you really don't have to. A lot of people, unless you're really, really good and can maneuver a little bit, it's going to be hard to pass. So if it's one of them tire saving deals, you kind of just cruise around there quarter, half throttle, and just stay close to the person in front of you. So when they do make a mistake, you can pass them, but don't just don't slide your car, don't burn your stuff up, and kind of go that way.
Well, I will let you go. I certainly appreciate the time. It was great to learn about racing a late model. Run me through your sponsors. Let's give some people some shout outs.
So obviously Ty Torga, Performance Parts, without him, it would definitely be hard to do what we do. Him owning the team and got all this rolling, I just want to thank him so much. And then we've got C&W Trucking, Tommy Pope Construction, Big D's Pizza, AccuForce, Fox Shocks, iBox Springs, M&M Painting and Construction, Clements Race Engines. I feel like we have the best race engines in the country. Lucas Oil Products, they have great oil and everything else, and we use all their stuff. So I want to thank them guys. Hall and Haskell, FK Rod Ends, VP Race Fuels, CarSourceAuto.com, Polymer Services, Hoosier Tire. They do an awesome job for us. Once again, Longhorn Chassis. We've had a great start to the year, and I'm super excited about that. Winners Rear Ends, Fast Shafts, Simpson Racewear, and just everyone else that helps out on the team. I want to thank all of them. I want to thank all the fans that support us. And if you ain't got any of the new merchandise, make sure you head over to devinmoranracing.com. We got some new stuff up there, and we're actually going to have some more new stuff, hopefully by the new Lucas races at March and Atomic and Brownstown. So just want to, once again, thanks for all them fans. I want to thank you for having me on the show. It's definitely a cluster trying to get on, but we finally made it happen.
We got it.
I was glad we did. And once again, thanks to all the guys that support and are partners of our team.
Cool. Well, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks, dude.